go ahead and start. There may be others joining us here in a little bit, but we'll go ahead and start. Tonight we're studying the Wars of Extermination, lesson 2 here. There they come. And sometimes we kind of wonder about
within 3.
There they are. Hello.
Over.
But sometimes we wonder
Yeah.
about
I thought it was 8.
what all these words on.
I can't listen. I gotta.
I know.
So,
Hey.
hello.
Hello. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Green shirt. Oh, where's your green?
Oh, up here, I got it. This has got green and red.
Well, we're starting in Deuteronomy 7:1. This few scriptures that we got. It said, when the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and hath cast out many nations before thee, Hittites, the Gershites, the Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thee.
You don't show up in that.
And when the Lord thy God shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them, utterly destroy them, and thou shalt make no covenant with them, or show mercy unto them. Neither shalt thou make marriages with them. Thy daughter thou shalt not give unto his son, nor his daughter shalt thou take unto thy son. For they will turn away thy son from following me, that they may serve other gods. So will the anger of the Lord be kindled against you, and destroy thee suddenly. Now this is Moses, God talking to Moses, and what we're talking about is, if you can see my screen, okay, it's showing this is what the gray outline here all the way around. This is the land God promised Abraham. It goes way up into Turkey, all through Syria, all down through here, through Jordan, down into the Sinai Peninsula, okay? This is what he was promised. And if you go to the land that, as the Israelites came back, this is the land where the people were filled in as. Here's the Philistines, Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Moabites, Canaanites, Gershines or Gershites, Hittites, Hivites. So there's a few more, but it's talking about in this area. And this is where, at the time, he was telling them to go and drive these people out. And they had, at that particular time, they had started, he gives this edict to wipe them out, push them out of their countries, and if they don't go, to wipe them out. So when they do that, it sounds pretty harsh, doesn't it? But what happens is, during that time, if they didn't, then they'll be led astray. And because of all the customs and the religions that they had at that particular time, they would go and, corrupt the people. They would join in with them. It's one of the reasons why the Jewish people wanted them to only marry inside their group, not just their tribe. Most of them even went on about their tribe, but a lot of times they didn't want them to go outside of the 12 tribes of Israel for sure, because they were most of these other nations was serving not just one God, but many gods. And they got that from some of the other countries down to Egypt and some of the Syrians and all that. They had many gods. So they would go about and corrupt the people. They would go through there, and the men would, find some that was in that area, and they would, start marrying them. So that's why God told them to push them out. Or if they don't go, then you'll kill them and take over. And in one in several places, if you go on down here in some of the scriptures, it tells them that to wipe them out, utterly destroy them. Another place here in Joshua, where they are going into the land, verse 21 of chapter 6, say they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, ox and sheep and ass, with the edge of the sword. And we know when they went and took the first couple of cities, Jericho and Ai, that's what God told them to do. And they did. The only one that survived that we know of was Rahab, and her family was one of those that did survive because they said they would convert over. Why would you think that they would kill all of them? I mean, men, women, children, and everything.
They did, like you said, they didn't want to intermarry. And,
Mhm.
and I thought about, as I was studying this, I thought about, the little children, okay, they were not at the age of accountability,
Mhm.
but, again, I guess, not guess, they went to heaven, the ones
Yeah.
that, but
It,
they were
it's
very adulterous. They offered up children. Some of them offered
yes,
up children for sacrifice, and
yes,
they were
and
heathenistic.
when they would go out, they would wage wars. And at the times, what they did, I mean, that was quote their business. They didn't. A lot of these, they may have had some small farms or something like that, and may had big farms too. But a lot of them were just armies, big armies. They'd get together and they would go and you know fight one another. Whoever won the battle, they'd get all the goods that was there, and all the women, all the gold, all the stuff of the other soldiers. So they would go back and forth in these areas. It wasn't just they was fighting against Israel, they'd fight against themselves too, because they'd want to take more territory. The king would want more territory, or the leaders of that area. But in this particular case, what would happen if Israel went through there and they killed all the soldiers? They were fighting against the soldiers. Well, then all you had left was the old men that couldn't, do anything, survive, and the widows and the children. And what they thought, and it was true back then, they couldn't earn a living, and they would starve to death. So they thought it was better, or more gracious, or more merciful, to go ahead and kill them now instead of just letting them die later on. And even to the animals, because the animals were the sacrifices that they would give, not only the human sacrifices, but that too. They wanted them a fresh start. Now, it wasn't every nation that he called them to do this to. There were some that he he said that they can live. We know we don't see and hear the Midianites in the map, but Moses actually married a Midianite. But later on, he tells them to wipe the Midianites out. Okay, let's go on down. It may not be in this, it's in the lesson scriptures, it's not in our lesson. But when they started to go through this, if you read in Judges 2:1, it said, an angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal to Bochum and said, I made of you go out of Egypt and have brought you into the land which I swore unto your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. You shall make no league with the inhabitants of this land. You shall throw down their altars, but ye have not obeyed my voice. Why have ye done this? Wherefore I also said, I will not drive them out from before you, but they shall be as thorns in your side, and their gods as a snare unto you. As we go through and we look through these different times, when he's telling them to get rid of these people, he's doing it for a purpose. One time, Saul didn't do that when he told him to go. Samuel told him to go and fight and to tear, or Nathan, Samuel, and wipe everybody out. Don't take any hostages. Kill everybody, kill all the animals. And he saved the king, and he saved a bunch of the donkeys and all the animals. And God was mad at him, and because of that, one of the reasons is that's why Saul lost his kingdom, because he would not follow what God told him to do afterwards. And when he was first king, he would do whatever God had him do, but later on he didn't. And even though David did some things too, he repented. Saul, we never did see that he repented. So that was kind of the issue that they
You
had.
always blame somebody else.
That's right. That's right.
It's a lot like the world today, isn't it?
It is.
If all the problems, we're none of the problems. It's everybody else is the problem.
That's right. We don't ever see it ourselves. So. But then in that second story, when he told them to go wipe it out, and then Moses was standing up on the hill, showing unto them the rod. When he raised the rod up, they would win the battle. And when he took his hands got tired, he'd bring it down, and they'd start losing the battle. And finally, they set him down, and Joshua and if it's Caleb, one on each side, held his arms up until they finished the battle, until they got it all done. So, we don't see it that way today as far as wars. And talking about the wars, there's two different types of wars, or many types, but one's kind of defensive where you're defending yourself, and one's offensive. Um, the attack at Pearl Harbor, that was a defensive. They attacked us, and so we went after them and started that war. So, or they started it, we just went on after it. And that's what God's kind of telling them to do nowadays. I mean, back then, nowadays, God doesn't tell us to go wipe people out. He tells us that at that particular time, in God's understanding that we don't understand, these people were not redeemable. They were not going to change. And because of that, he said, they'll be thorns in your flesh. They'll aggravate you the rest of your lives. And we're seeing that today. I mean, if you look back on the map, let me find, I don't know if I got the new map up, but I didn't. It's where the Philistines today, that's where a lot of the problems were, right along that coast of the Mediterranean. That's the Gaza Strip. We see that a lot of them are in, they, and I'm sure it's probably some of the relatives long past down through there. Some of the people was never wiped out. We see several years later, when Israel came up and was going through this, going into the promised land, getting ready to cross over Jordan and start this, they were attacked. And because of that, he remembered and told them that they needed that soon. If you remember the story, it was Balaam, and I think it's Balak was the king. And he told them, Balaam, he wanted Balaam to go prophesy against them, or go against Israel, and he couldn't do that. He couldn't. Every time he tried to, it would wind up, to their betterment. And so finally, he told the king, he said, "I know how you can get them. Send your women over there, your young women over there, and they'll corrupt them." And that's what happened. And because of that, God said, "You need to wipe them out. You need to take care of them, because they will again be a thorn in their side. They will lead you astray." And ultimately, that was the breakup of the 12 tribes. I mean, Israel first, they started serving other gods, and then later on, Judah started serving other gods. So ultimately, they did not do what God wanted them to do, keep serving him. We go on down, as I was reading in Judges, where the angel came up and told them, "Make no league with the inhabitants of this land. Ye shall throw down their altars, but ye have not obeyed my voice. Why have ye done this? Therefore I will not drive them out from you, but they will be as thorns in your side." So God gave him a promise. He said, you know, go out and I'll be with you and I'll help drive them out in front of you so they'll get out. Well, since they didn't do what they were supposed to do, God didn't help them. And we need to understand that in our time, that when God tells us something to do, we need to do it. We need to follow through on it. Otherwise, we're getting something for nothing, basically. But we don't. He won't follow through with it if we don't do what he says. Then it jumps over to the New Testament, Matthew 24:6. It says, ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not. For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. That's happening today. I mean, it's happened for the last umpteen years. There's been somebody fighting against somebody somewhere in the world all the time. I don't know how many different wars is going on. Probably should look that up just to see how many is actually going on at any one time. Different people groups in a nation fighting, against themselves, basically against their country, somebody else in their country. So that's what God wanted them to do as far as be a strong nation. If you serve them and you have a focus that we can't seem to keep our focus even today, because as we know, this nation is getting torn apart right now by the different things that is going on. They don't want to be like everybody else for some reason, or they do want to be like the rest of the world and not like us. Romans 12:18 says, if it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. So back then there was not as many people, and he was pushing his nation to, establish themselves. Nowadays, everybody's pretty well established. He wants us to live and not fight against people. If we don't need to be the instigators of fighting. It's basically what it means. We can defend ourselves if we need to, but we don't need, since we're a different nation as far as away from everybody, we really don't have to worry too much about Canada or Mexico or somebody like that coming in, because it'd be harder for the other countries to come in. But now with all the modern warfare they have, it would be a lot easier with the nuclear bombs and everything that they could.
There it says if be possible. There's some nations and even some people you can't, again, there it's as much as possible on your part.
Yeah.
Some just don't want peace.
No, we can see that in the Middle East, that they say one thing but they do another. And, different groups keep getting caught. They're supposed to be abiding by certain things, but yet they still find evidence that they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And so, like you said, that's the way God sees some people groups, that just like he did in these nations here, he loves everybody, but some people don't love him at all, and they will never love him. And it's hard for us to comprehend that, but that doesn't mean to say that we need to go wipe them out. That's God's doing. He'll take care of that in his time whenever it comes time. What we need to do is to be at peace with them, to try to get along with them. And like you say, some people you're just not going to get along with. The more they push on you, they'll start pushing you a little bit to try to get their way or get whatever, and they just won't stop. So sometimes you have to say, that's all it is. And then they start coming after you. And then in Ephesians, Paul tells us here how to put how to fight against that. It's not so much now the physical fight, but it's the spiritual fight. And that's what it should have been back then too. It should have been spiritually. He was trying to keep them spiritually clean and physically clean, but because of that, they wouldn't listen. Paul tells us in Ephesians 6:11 and 12, put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of the darkness of this world, and against spiritual wickedness in high places. That was almost 2,000 years ago. It's still happening even today. We see things going on. And although like we say, they say one thing, all different groups of people, they say it and they either have their fingers crossed behind their back or they're just outright know they're lying or something. So, comments or questions or anything? Okay. Guess we'll talk to y'all next week then, or see you Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Tell Liz we saw her.
Okay. Y'all remember Sister